Uploaded began with a single, sickening buzz. It was Tuesday, just after 10. My husband, Mark, was supposedly wrestling with a project deadline. I was on the nursery floor, surrounded by tiny folded clothes, my spine screaming from the weight of our son at 34 weeks. All I wanted was for him to come home. His phone, forgotten on the kitchen island, lit up the dim room. I heaved myself up to check it, assuming it was him. It wasn't. A social media notification from an app I didn't know he used glowed on the screen. The preview was short, but it was enough to steal the air from my lungs. Can't wait for tomorrow. I miss you. The profile picture was a smiling woman I'd never seen. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of denial. It's a mistake. A misunderstanding. But my hands were already shaking, moving with a will of their own. I went to his laptop, opened it, and prayed I was wrong. He was still logged in, and there it was. A parallel universe, a complete double life running alongside ours. It was a total system shock. The floor beneath me seemed to vanish. I was staring at months of messages, photos, and videos, an entire relationship, meticulously hidden. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching a film about some other poor woman's life falling apart. I sank onto the soft blue rug of the nursery, the one we'd picked out together, and a silent, wrenching sob tore through me. When Mark walked in after midnight, he was smiling, asking if the baby had been kicking. He took one look at my face, then at the open laptop on the rocking chair. The color drained from his face. The fight that erupted was a chaotic storm of shouts and shattered truths. He tried to deny it, then came the excuses, each one a fresh stab of pain. It wasn't a one-time slip. It was a long-term affair. And the final, soul-crushing detail? The timeline. While I was at ultrasounds, gazing at our son's flickering heartbeat, he was with her. While I felt our baby kick for the first time, he was building a secret world with someone else. In the days that followed, I was a ghost in my own home. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was suffocating under a blanket of shock, white-hot rage, and a profound sadness that settled deep into my bones. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the beautiful round belly he claimed to adore, and I felt utterly worthless. The self-blame was a venomous whisper in my ear. Was I not enough? What did I do wrong? The emotional turmoil began to take a physical toll. At my next checkup, my doctor's face was grim. My blood pressure was dangerously high. You have to calm down, she warned, her voice gentle but firm. This level of stress isn't just bad for you, it's a risk to the baby. The words hit me like a physical blow. The stress of his betrayal could trigger preterm labor or affect my son's health. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had endangered our child. In that sterile examination room, the grief began to burn away, leaving behind a cold, hard fury. That fear was the spark I needed. It was the moment the fog of sorrow began to clear, replaced with a fierce, protective instinct that roared to life inside me. This was no longer just about my shattered marriage. It was about my son. I had to pull him out of this toxic storm. As soon as I got home, through choked sobs, I called my sister, Chloe. I didn't have to say much. The raw pain in my voice was enough. "I'm on my way," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Pack a bag, just the essentials for you and the baby. You are not spending another night in that house." Her decisiveness was the anchor I desperately needed. While I waited, I moved through the house like a zombie, picking up items that now felt like relics from a buried life. The home we built together had become a mausoleum of broken promises. Staying was impossible. I needed a sanctuary for my sanity and for the health of my child. The fight was just beginning. When Chloe arrived, she was a whirlwind of purpose. She took one look at my tear-streaked face, pulled me into a fierce hug, and then got to work. She didn't ask questions or demand details. She just started packing a bag for me with an efficiency that bordered on military precision. Leaving the home we had shared together felt like tearing off a limb. Every object held a memory, now irrevocably tainted. The armchair where he used to read to my belly, the photos on the wall of us smiling, a happy couple, living a lie. The half-finished nursery, a monument to a future that would never exist. With each item Chloe packed, I felt a piece of my old life being severed. Walking out the front door for the last time was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I left my key on the kitchen counter, a small, symbolic gesture of surrender. But as Chloe drove us away and I watched my perfect life shrink in the rearview mirror, it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like an escape. Chloe's apartment was small, but it was a fortress. The moment the door clicked shut behind us, I felt a sliver of safety for the first time in days. She set me up in her spare room, brought me a cup of tea, and then took my phone. "I'll handle him," she said, her jaw tight. "You need to rest. You and Leo." She'd already named my unborn son. For the next 48 hours, she became my gatekeeper, fielding a relentless barrage of calls and texts from a panicked Mark. I could hear her voice through the door, cold and unyielding. It was a strange feeling, being a refugee in my own life, completely dependent on my sister. I'd lie in bed, one hand on my belly, feeling my son kick, and just stare at the ceiling. The despair was a physical weight, but underneath it, a new feeling was taking root. It was quiet, cold, and calculating. My heartbreak was hardening into something else, something much more dangerous. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make him pay for it. Sleep offered no escape, so I stopped trying. In the dead of night, illuminated by the glow of my laptop screen, I descended into the digital rabbit hole of my husband's treachery. He was still logged into everything on his old machine, a fatal mistake born of arrogance. The affair wasn't just a betrayal of our vows, it was a staggering financial drain. I uncovered a secret credit card, opened months ago. On it were charges for lavish dinners I was never invited to, weekend trips to boutique hotels I'd never seen, and expensive jewelry I would never wear. Thousands upon thousands of dollars, siphoned from our shared future to fund his sordid fantasy. While I was budgeting for diapers and saving for our son's college fund, he was financing another woman's lifestyle. The anger that filled me was pure and glacial. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a calculated long-term heist of our life. The evidence was all there, a neat and tidy list of his sins, and I meticulously saved every receipt and statement. With a sick, morbid curiosity, I clicked on her profile. Isabella. The name felt like acid on my tongue. Her page was a perfectly curated collage of a life I was supposed to have. Photos of her on a beach I recognized from a business trip Mark had taken, sipping a cocktail he told me he'd drink alone. There was a picture of her wearing a delicate gold necklace. I found the receipt for it on the secret credit card statement. She was younger, with the carefree confidence of someone who had never had her world ripped out from under her. I scrolled through months of posts, matching dates to moments in my own life. Here she was at a concert, the night I was home, sick with morning sickness. Here she was at a winery, the day I had my glucose test. The humiliation was a physical burn. Mark hadn't just cheated, he had replaced me, and he had used our money to do it. That night, I stopped crying. The anger had crystallized into a diamond-hard resolve. She wouldn't know it for months, but her perfect life was about to end. The next morning, Chloe found me a lawyer. She wasn't the warm, sympathetic type. She was a shark in a tailored suit named Mrs. Albright, and she was exactly what I needed. I laid out the story, my voice flat and emotionless. I presented the affair, the timeline, and then the financial records. Mrs. Albright's eyes, which had been passive, sharpened with interest. "The affair gives you grounds for divorce, Amelia," she said, her voice crisp. "But the financial infidelity, that is a weapon." She explained the legal concept of marital waste. He had used shared assets to fund his affair without my knowledge or consent. This changed everything. She continued, "He's arrogant and sloppy. She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the credit card statements. We can use that. My advice? Do not engage. Let him think you're just a heartbroken, hysterical pregnant woman. The more he underestimates you, the better. Gather everything. Every email, every receipt. We will build a case so airtight he won't know what hit him. I left her office not feeling like a victim, but like a general preparing for war. Mark's messages continued, a pathetic cycle of begging, blaming, and faux concern for the baby. He wrote long, rambling texts about his mistake and how the stress was bad for me. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He accused me of being cruel and rash for leaving. He didn't know the meaning of the word. Following Mrs. Albright's counsel, I ignored every call and every plea. Then I composed a single, chillingly simple
text message and sent it. All future communication is to be directed to my lawyer, Ms. Albright. Her contact information will be provided to you. Do not contact me or my sister again. I hit send and felt a grim wave of satisfaction. I imagined his face, the flicker of confusion turning to panic as he realized he had lost control of the narrative. He was used to managing me, to smoothing things over with empty words. That was over. For the first time in our relationship, I held all the power, and he was completely in the dark. A small dark smile touched my lips. The fun was just beginning. My nightly dives into Mark's digital life became a ritual. I was no longer looking for heartbreak. I was hunting for ammunition. And then I found the mother lode. He had foolishly saved his work passwords in his browser. With a few clicks, I was inside his corporate email account. What I discovered was a betrayal on an entirely new level. He hadn't just been cheating on me, he'd been cheating his company. He'd used corporate travel accounts to book flights for Isabella. He'd taken her to the company's exclusive apartment in the city for their trysts, expensing the client entertainment. But the true jackpot was in his chat logs. In messages to Isabella, he openly mocked his boss, calling him an incompetent fool. He shared confidential company information, belittled his colleagues, and bragged about how he was next in line for a promotion he clearly didn't deserve. He had handed me his entire professional life on a silver platter. I meticulously screenshotted every conversation, every expense report, every damning piece of evidence, and saved it all to a secure, encrypted drive. His infidelity was no longer just a personal matter. It was a corporate liability. The following weeks passed in a strange, tense quiet. I moved through my days with a singular, chilling purpose. I attended my prenatal appointments, focusing on deep breaths and keeping my blood pressure down. I started therapy, not to process my grief, but to forge my anger into a tool. My therapist, a wise older woman, seemed to understand that I wasn't there to cry, but to strategize. She helped me channel my emotions into a clear-headed plan. I documented everything. I created a timeline of the affair, cross-referencing it with his work travel and our personal calendar. Every lie was a data point. Every secret expense was a line item in the case I was building against him. Mark, meanwhile, was floundering. He had respected my radio silence, likely on the advice of whatever cut-rate lawyer he'd hired. He probably thought I was just waiting for the baby to be born, that I'd eventually soften. He had no idea that while he was waiting for me to fall apart, I was meticulously constructing his downfall. One afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a mutual acquaintance, a woman named Nina, who I'd always liked but wasn't in my inner circle. Her voice was hesitant, laced with guilt. She stammered, "Amelia, I have to tell you something. I saw them, Mark and that woman. It was months ago, at a restaurant. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. I was a coward." She paused and then delivered the final twist of the knife.
The worst part is, she said, her voice dropping, is what he told people. He started telling friends that you were becoming really unstable. He said the pregnancy hormones were making you paranoid and difficult, and that he needed space. He was laying the groundwork for months, Amelia. He was painting you as the crazy wife to justify his own behavior. The phone felt cold in my hand. It wasn't enough to betray me. He had to poison my reputation, to preemptively discredit me. The humiliation was a fresh wave of nausea. My revenge would not just be about justice. It would be about reclaiming my name. The stress, a constant, simmering poison, finally took its toll. At 37 weeks, I went into early labor. It started with a dull ache in my back that quickly escalated into relentless searing contractions. Chloe broke every speed limit getting me to the hospital. The pain was blinding, a physical manifestation of the emotional agony I had been enduring for weeks. The sterile white room felt like a cage. Every wave of pain was tangled up with the memory of his betrayal. This sacred, terrifying moment was supposed to be ours. He was supposed to be holding my hand, telling me I could do it. Instead, he was a ghost haunting the room, a phantom of a life that was now dead. I had given the hospital strict instructions. Mark was not to be contacted. He was not to be allowed on the floor. This birth, this child was mine. It was the first definitive act of drawing a boundary around my new life. Chloe was my rock, her hand a steady presence in the storm, her voice a constant murmur of encouragement. After 18 agonizing hours, my son was born. They placed him on my chest, this tiny, perfect, screaming human, and the entire world outside that hospital room simply dissolved. His name was Leo. As I held him, smelling his newborn scent and feeling his small body against me, a love so fierce and primal it defied description washed over me. It was a tidal wave, powerful enough to cleanse the filth of the past few weeks. The pain of Mark's betrayal was still there, a shadow lingering in the corner, but the light from this new love was blindingly bright. It eclipsed everything else. In that moment, holding my son, I understood my purpose with absolute clarity. This wasn't about a broken heart anymore. It was about protecting this innocent life. The revenge I had been planning was no longer for me. It was for Leo. It was to secure his future, to ensure that the man who had so carelessly risked his well-being would never be able to harm us again. My fight had a face, and it was the beautiful, wrinkled face of my son. 1 week after Leo was born, while the world thought I was drowning in diapers and postpartum hormones, I made my first move. From the quiet of Chloe's apartment, with my son sleeping peacefully in a bassinet beside me, I assembled an anonymous package. It was addressed to the CEO and the head of human resources at Mark's prestigious firm. Inside there was no letter, no emotional plea. There was only cold, hard evidence. I included printouts of the fraudulent expense reports, screenshots of him using the company apartment for his affair, and copies of the chat logs where he openly disparaged his boss, calling him an incompetent fool. I compiled it all into a neat, professional-looking dossier. I wore gloves while handling it and drove to a post office in a different town to mail it. There was no return address. It was a poison pill, delivered silently and without a trace. I felt no remorse, no hesitation. This was not an act of passion. It was a corporate execution, and I was simply pulling the trigger. 2 days later, the first shockwave hit. I heard it from Nina, who had heard it through the corporate grapevine. Mark had been walked out of his office by security. He was suspended indefinitely, pending a full internal investigation. His work phone was confiscated, his laptop seized. He was locked out of the empire he was so proud of. The news spread like wildfire through our old social circle. The narrative Mark had so carefully constructed, that of the long-suffering husband with a hormonal, unstable wife, was instantly obliterated. People were stunned. The man they knew was a charming, successful executive was now the subject of a humiliating corporate scandal. Mark, predictably, panicked. He blew up Chloe's phone, leaving dozens of frantic, furious voicemails. He didn't understand what was happening. I listened to one of them, his voice tight with disbelief and rage, and felt absolutely nothing. He was just a noise on a machine. The foundation of his life was cracking, and I was the one who had laid the dynamite. The second phase of my plan required a colder heart. Through my nocturnal digging, I had discovered a crucial detail about Isabella. She was married. A quick search revealed her husband, a man whose public profile painted a picture of quiet domesticity, completely oblivious to her secret life. For a moment, I hesitated. Was it my place to detonate another person's life? I looked over at Leo, sleeping in his crib, a perfect picture of innocence. The man who was supposed to protect him had willingly put him at risk for this woman. My resolve hardened into ice. This woman was not an innocent bystander. She was a co-conspirator. Her husband deserved to know the truth, just as I had. I assembled a second package, a condensed version of the first with screenshots of the most intimate messages between her and Mark and receipts of gifts he'd bought her.
I sent it to her husband's office address. No note, just the unvarnished, ugly truth. I was burning their world to the ground, and I wasn't going to leave any survivors. The collateral damage was swift and brutal. Isabella's life imploded. Her husband, armed with irrefutable proof, filed for divorce immediately. The scandal had also reached her employer, a partner company of Mark's firm. She was fired for unprofessional conduct and for her role in the misuse of corporate assets. Stripped of her husband, her lover, and her job in the span of a week, she became unhinged. She somehow found my number and began sending a stream of vitriolic, hateful messages, blaming me for ruining her life. She called me a psycho, a monster. I read the first few messages with a detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a specimen. Then, without a flicker of emotion, I blocked her number. She was a casualty in a war she had willingly joined. I felt no pity, no guilt. My only concern was the small, warm baby in my arms. Her drama was a distant echo from a world I no longer inhabited. The slate was being wiped clean, one scorched life at a time. The divorce proceedings were a formality. Mark was a ghost. He had been officially terminated from his job, his career and reputation in ashes. He showed up to the mediation looking gaunt and defeated. He had no leverage, no resources, and no fight left in him. Miss Albright was relentless. She presented the mountain of evidence, the financial infidelity, the marital waste, and his termination for cause. Mark's lawyer could do nothing but stutter and attempt to mitigate the damage. The judge was not impressed. In the end, it was a slaughter. I was awarded full physical and legal custody of Leo. I was given the house, which would be sold, with the majority of the proceeds going to me to compensate for the money he had squandered. He was ordered to pay a substantial amount of child support, calculated based on his previous six-figure income and earning potential, not his current state of unemployment. He was legally and financially ruined, a pariah in the world he once ruled. A few months later, I had to drive to Mark's parents' house to drop off some legal papers with his mother. As I pulled up, I saw him. He was in the front yard pushing an old lawnmower. He wore stained sweatpants and an old t-shirt, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked up as my car approached, and our eyes met for a brief second. There was no anger in his gaze, just a hollow emptiness. Leo was sleeping soundly in his car seat in the back. I didn't slow down, I just continued to his parents' front door. But in that fleeting moment, a small, dark, and deeply satisfying smile touched my lips. It wasn't joy, and it wasn't happiness. It was the grim, quiet satisfaction of a job well done. It was the feeling of scales being balanced.
He had tried to break me when I was at my most vulnerable. Now he was living in his childhood bedroom, mowing his parents' lawn, a king dethroned and exiled to the suburbs. 2 years have passed. The sound of my son's laughter is the soundtrack of my life. Leo is a whirlwind of a toddler, full of joy and endless energy. I sold the house, that beautiful, tainted monument to a lie, and used the money to buy a small townhouse in a new neighborhood. It's entirely ours, a place with no ghosts and no bad memories. After the divorce was finalized, I used my background in marketing to start a small freelance consulting business from home. It's thriving. I have financial independence, something I will never take for granted again. I've built a life for us that is peaceful, stable, and happy. I am a single mother, a business owner, a survivor. The woman who sobbed on the nursery floor feels like a different person, a lifetime away. I am no longer defined by his betrayal, but by my own resilience and the fierce love I have for my child. The scars are still there, of course. They are faint, silvery lines on my heart that I trace sometimes in the quiet hours after Leo is asleep. The idea of trusting a man with that level of intimacy feels like a foreign concept, a language I no longer speak. I continue with therapy not to rehash the past, but to build a stronger future for myself. I don't regret my actions. I don't see what I did as simple revenge. I see it as a necessary and just rebalancing of the universe. He made a calculated decision to risk my well-being and the future of our unborn child. I made a calculated decision to protect us. I took away his power, his money, and his reputation, the 3 things he valued more than his own family. It was a brutal act, but it was an act of preservation. It was the mother bear inside me protecting her cub at all costs. Last month, a letter arrived. It was from Mark. For a moment, my heart stuttered. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. It wasn't an apology. It was 4 pages of bitter, self-pitying delusion. He rambled on about how I had overreacted, how I had been vindictive, how I had conspired to ruin his life over a simple mistake. He took no responsibility. He was still the victim in his own warped story. I read the entire thing, standing in my sun-filled kitchen, and when I was done, I felt a profound sense of peace. The anger was gone, the hurt was gone. All that remained was a distant, clinical pity for this hollow man. He hadn't learned a single thing. He still had no power over my emotions. I calmly walked over to the shredder, fed the letter into it, and went to go play with my son. He was just a ghost, and I no longer believed in them. When I look at my life now, I don't see the ashes of what was burned down. I see what I built in its place. I see Leo's bright, happy face, his hand tucked securely in mine. I see my own strength, a force I never knew I possessed until I was forced to use it. My worth was never tied to his fidelity. It was forged in my own resilience. The fallout from his betrayal was unreal, a cataclysm that should have destroyed me. But the strength you find when you are fighting for more than just yourself is even more unreal. It's a superpower. For anyone who has been through the fire of a betrayal like this, know that it does get better. You can heal, but more importantly, you can fight back. You can take control, and you can build a new, more beautiful life, not from the ashes of your old one, but on the solid ground of your own incredible power.
The night my world imploded began with a single, sickening buzz. It was Tuesday, just after 10. My husband, Mark, was supposedly wrestling with a project deadline. I was on the nursery floor, 34 weeks pregnant. His phone, forgotten on the kitchen island, lit up the dim room. A social media notification from an app I didn't know he used glowed on the screen. The preview was short, but it was enough. "Can't wait for tomorrow. I miss you." The profile picture was a smiling woman I'd never seen. My hands were shaking, moving with a will of their own. I went to his laptop, opened it, and prayed I was wrong. He was still logged in, and there it was. A parallel universe, a complete double life running alongside ours. When Mark walked in after midnight, he was smiling, asking if the baby had been kicking. He took one look at my face, then at the open laptop on the rocking chair. The color drained from his face. The fight was a chaotic storm. He tried to deny it, then came the excuses. It wasn't a one-time slip. It was a long-term affair. And the final, soul-crushing detail? The timeline. While I was at ultrasounds gazing at our son's flickering heartbeat, he was with her. While I felt our baby kick for the first time, he was building a secret world with someone else. In the dead of night, illuminated by the glow of my laptop, I descended into the digital rabbit hole of my husband's treachery. He was still logged into everything on his old machine, a fatal mistake. The affair wasn't just a betrayal of our vows, it was a staggering financial drain. I uncovered a secret credit card, opened months ago. On it were charges for lavish dinners, weekend trips to boutique hotels, and expensive jewelry I would never wear. Thousands of dollars siphoned from our shared future to fund his sordid fantasy. The anger that filled me was pure and glacial. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a calculated, long-term heist of our life. At my next checkup, my doctor's face was grim. My blood pressure was dangerously high. "You have to calm down," she warned, her voice gentle but firm. "This level of stress isn't just bad for you, it's a risk to the baby." The words hit me like a physical blow. The stress of his betrayal could trigger preterm labor. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had endangered our child. In that sterile examination room, the grief began to burn away, leaving behind a cold, hard fury. That fear was the spark I needed. It was the moment the fog of sorrow began to clear, replaced by a fierce, protective instinct that roared to life inside me. With a sick, morbid curiosity, I clicked on her profile. Isabella. Her page was a perfectly curated collage of a life I was supposed to have. Photos of her on a beach I recognized from a business trip Mark had taken. There was a picture of her wearing a delicate gold necklace. I found the receipt for it on the secret credit card statement. I scrolled through months of posts, matching dates to moments in my own life. Here she was at a concert, the night I was home, sick with morning sickness. Mark hadn't just cheated, he had replaced me, and he had used our money to do it. That night, I stopped crying. The rage had crystallized into a diamond-hard resolve. She wouldn't know it for months, but her perfect life was about to end. The next morning, my sister found me a lawyer. Miss Albright was a shark in a tailored suit, and she was exactly what I needed. I laid out the story, the affair, the timeline, and then the financial records. Miss Albright's eyes sharpened. "The affair gives you grounds for divorce, Amelia," she said, her voice crisp. "But the financial infidelity, that is a weapon." She explained he had used shared assets to fund his affair without my consent. "He's arrogant and sloppy," she continued, tapping a nail on the credit card statements. "We can use that. Let him think you're just a heartbroken, hysterical pregnant woman. The more he underestimates you, the better."